Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening is Peter Rutzler. The nights are getting colder, but Liga is just hotting up. And with another exciting weekend of action, who came out on top and who was left watching in a cafe? All of that and more after the latest headlines. Saint-Etienne are still winless under new man Julien Sablé, as Strasbourg came from behind twice on Friday evening to earn a 2-2 draw at the Stade Geoffroy Guichard. Saturday's early kickoff saw a feisty Breton derby settled by a Wabi Kazri brace for Rennes. Nantes had Emiliano Sala score from the spot in between the Tunisians' double as Nicolas Palois saw red in the second half. In the multiplex, Montpellier piled more woe on Lille with a 3-0 win, with Marcelo Bielsa resigned to viewing from a laptop in a local cafe, as Caen remained in the European places with a 1-0 win over falling Bordeaux. Angers slipped to 16th and out of the drop zone on only goal difference after a humbling 3-0 defeat at Troyes, while Amiens helped cut Metz further adrift by winning 2-0. Dijon made it 3 wins in 4 games as well, with a strong 3-1 win over Toulouse, piling more pressure at the door of Pascal Duprat, who seemed a little bit more interested in his phone than the action on the pitch at the weekend. On Sunday, Lyon ripped apart a laboured Nice side 5-0, scoring 4 in the first half. The result lifted them into second in the table, while Lucien Favre's men drop into the relegation places. Marseille remain a point behind that Lyon side after a 1-0 win over Guingamp, with Florent Thauvin notching the winner with an excellent run in the first half. The weekend's final match saw Paris Saint-Germain head to the home of the champions Monaco and walk out comfortable winners. The 2-1 scoreline, not telling the entire story, had returning forward Kylian Mbappe been more clinical, it could have been an even bigger victory for the Parisians. In other news that we are hearing tonight, Bielsa has brought a case to the LFP on Lille, preempting wrongful termination of his current contract. The situation thickens. And that's all for your news. But remember, to keep up to date with everything French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with Paris Saint-Germain's victory over Monaco at the Stade Louis II. As I mentioned in the news, it was a relatively easy game in all essence, really, Peter. Much easier than maybe we anticipated, in a way that PSG were coming into this game in excellent form. But was it disappointing to see Monaco not really put up as much of a fight as we really hoped to keep this title race at least a little bit interesting?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was surprising in the end. I think we kind of anticipated it would be a Monaco display that was going to be far and away from what we had become accustomed to from them last season. I mean, PSG came into the game in really good form, and I think we saw them pretty much at their best. So if they could have been more clinical, I think we could have been talking about a much bigger scoreline than the final score ultimately was. Monaco, we saw a culmination of a variety of things. I think in recent weeks, defensively, they haven't been good, and they've been shown to be vulnerable in a way that we're not used to with Monaco. Jardim set them up in a 5-3-2 just to try and rectify that. And, in the first half, I felt they did okay defensively. They kept the scoreline low. I think it would have been the main priority to start with. PSG created opportunities. They had a fair amount of the ball, but you wouldn't say they overran them. I mean, obviously, Mbappe rounded Subasic early on, missed an open goal, first of a plethora of chances that he squandered. But only 1-0 down at the break wasn't too bad. I mean, the goal itself was awful. Raji did not have a good night before he was ultimately substituted. he just seemed off the pace and unable to deal with the front three of Cavani, Mbappe, and Neymar, who were pairing. It's a difficult one, really. I wonder what you think of how Jardim set them up, because a 5-3-2 did provide them with that solidity that has been lacking. I mean, they were ruthlessly exposed by Leipzig, and I think they didn't have that. But in the second half, it was just from the kickoff. I think I tweeted Eric Devin saying they weren't doing that bad defensively, and then instantly had to retract it because they were just blown away, and then obviously they gave away a penalty. But it's the way they set up wasn't what we're used to. And what did you think of the 5-3-2?
I thought it was a mistake in the end. It's a difficult one because we mentioned last season how well Leonardo Jardim did in games against Paris Saint-Germain by changing things a little bit, especially in that first fixture. Shifting things around a little bit just helped support the team a little bit more. But it stinks a little bit of what has happened all season, really, for Monaco, which is they can't really decide on a formation that fits all the players they have. I mean, they wanted to play 3 at the back, 2, I'm assuming, to contain all these excellent attacking players that Paris Saint-Germain have, especially with Neymar and Mbappe being more inside forwards, and Draxler also prone to being in that central area as well, sort of condense that. But they just really struggled. I mean, Mbappe, although he didn't score, I feel a little bit sorry for him. If he finishes off 1 or 2 of those chances, I don't think the headlines are very different. And the piece that was written in The Guardian by Adam and Eric today as well really highlighted that he just felt like he needed that little goal to go in, and then it might just all click for him again. Because he was making the exact kind of runs he needed to. He was absolutely devastating. He was making Radji look like a novice, and it just never really worked or clicked in that 3. I don't think Jemison really worked out where it was. He kept making Glick isolated. Georges was way too advanced. He took that left wing back role with very much a liberal sense of the word, I think, and that's why they sort of maybe shifted it a little bit in the second half to be maybe a bit more of a flat back 4 in Armand Toure probably dropping a little bit deeper. But it never really clicked. They've still not worked out how to fit Tielemans into this side with Moutinho and Fabinho. Fabinho looks a little bit lost in the sense that he's trying to do the work of 2 players. It's not really working. Falcao is maybe snatching at things. Now he's had a couple of games without a goal. He's not got as much service because of the issues they're having. He's not got as many around him. I don't think Ronnie Lopez is sort of cooled off after a really good couple of weeks in October. Keita Balde is not really creating much really for others, although he did have a really good assist in the Champions League the other week as well. But they're just lacking something. I think with Thomas Lemar out, it is a really tough moment for them. But I do want to come back to Paris, Peter, and really I mentioned Mbappe really having not the greatest of games. He could have really killed this off and been an absolute cricket scorer if he really, really started killing some of these finishers. But I just want to talk about the performances of Neymar and especially Edinson Cavani, who probably might be even the most important of those 3 attackers at the moment. He scored 16 goals this season, and he's on fire.
Yeah, he is. I've never been I've never been the man to really shout things about Cavani. I've never really been enamoured by him at PSG. Obviously, he's had to bide his time, whatever. But you can't really argue with his goal scoring record at the moment. I think it's something like 22 in all competitions for Cavani, and that's ridiculous. I mean, we haven't even reached December yet, and he is playing with Neymar, who that does want to take the spot kicks. I mean, if he did have the spot kick again, we're talking about even more goals. So, especially I think Cavani has upped his game in a way that I think a number of players at PSG have done that of late. I look at Draxler and how well he's done. Especially, I was really impressed with him against Monaco. He's really pushing his name forward to be the 4th man of the MCN front 3. His movement from midfield, offering them a different option, allowing the fluidity that they have. You see Mbappe moving into a central position. Cavani drifts out wide. Neymar likes to stick on the left, but then comes up central. And Draxler is slowly learning to pick the pockets of where there are gaps. And His assist for Cavani's goal was excellent. It was really good movement. And he was offering Monaco different problems, which is really encouraging for Emery to see, especially considering the questions that have been raised about the PSG midfield. And I still feel there are questions to be had about it. Rabiot and Verratti have done well in his absence of Thiago Motta through injury. It seems like they are adapting to his absence. One of them is willing to sit. I thought Rabiot was excellent in doing that. Verratti as well was very disciplined in terms of his positioning. But that's allowed Draxler to push on and to switch from a 4-3-3, which it seems to present itself before the game, to being sort of a 4-2-3-1, almost a 4 in terms of the movement of the front 3/4, if you include Draxler. And Draxler's established himself in midfield, and he's made himself I think Emery's go-to man. I think Pastore came in last week in Draxler's absence and did well. I thought he did well. Position. But now I think the fact that Emery's turned to him, brought him back into the side and performed again, it makes it harder for Emery to drop him. And, you know, we could potentially be talking about a front four, and Draxler's not a bad player either. And of course, we're not even talking about the bench and Di Maria and whatever else to come in. But the issue with last night is, of course, that Monaco didn't really challenge them. We didn't really see that backline pressed until relatively late on, where it did squeak a little. In midfield, I was surprised to see how comfortable they were relatively against Fabinho, Moutinho and Tielemans. And as you said, it felt like Fabinho was trying to do too much. Tielemans doesn't quite know how he's supposed to play in that role, and João Moutinho needs that sort of protection to be creative. So I feel like there's progress being made, and I feel like with PSG, especially now, we're looking at a more refined, complete unit that is starting to pick up some momentum that is going to sweep aside teams with consummate ease.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you make an excellent point with Draxler. It's still surprising that a lot of, and at the same time, completely unsurprising that a lot of English media are still linking the German with a move to England or to Bayern Munich. But he has really become an important player for Paris Saint-Germain in the last couple of weeks, of sort of linking everything together and really taking the form that he had in the second half of last year. Because I still admit, and I'm surprised that more people haven't noticed this earlier, that he's much better centrally. This sort of theory that he was a left winger that likes to cut inside, it was beyond me. It never really worked at Wolfsburg. It worked at times as a matter of convenience last season, but he's much better inside. He's more allowed to be creative. I think they're fooled by the fact that he likes to pick up those positions sort of left of the 18-yard box, just between there, maybe 30 yards out or so, in that little hole. And he does score a lot of his goals from the left-hand side, but he's not a left winger or a left inside forward. He's much better from those central areas where he can roam a little bit more and be the creative force he is. But I agree with the defence as well, Peter. I think the telling one really for me was that Levin Kurzawa came off. He picked up an early booking and he's already at a risk being a fullback, but to be brought off for another fullback in this game just screams to me that this is the problem position for Unai Emery at the moment. He can't quite decide whether Yuri's the right man for it yet. He's not completely sold on him. I'm not either. I think he's a good player, but he's good going forward. I'm still not, in a similar way to Kurzawa, I'm not convinced of him going backwards, but
it's quite a funny substitution when that happens, because it does keep happening. We get Kurzawa for Yuri, and like last night, you get Kurzawa looks completely dejected, and Yuri himself almost looks embarrassed to be coming on. He sort of like hunches over, just like, head forward, not really. He doesn't strike you as a player saying, "Yeah, I'm going to steal the place." He just sort of like meeps on, and then the two of them just intertwine.
It's so strange, and it's the fact that it's their first substitution as well. That's on 69 minutes is to bring on Yuri. It seems ever so odd that a team that's winning games decides, because sometimes, okay, if they're bringing off a forward for a defender, fair enough, but bringing a left back off for another left back just screams like that you're just not decided on what you need to do in that position, and that's maybe where he needs to focus in the next couple of weeks. Give Yuri a few more games. I mean, they've got the ideal opportunity against, obviously, Bayern Munich in the Champions League in a couple of weeks, obviously, because they've qualified and they're definitely top of the group. It gives them a bit of a chance to maybe give some of these French players like Lo Celso and less of a fringe, but Kimpembe a chance, maybe even Trapp to give him some confidence. I think that's where they're heading. But Monaco obviously fell out of Europe in midweek, Peter, and their season so far, especially in this first half, has really started petering away, if excuse my turn of phrase. What do you think needs to happen in this sort of next couple of months? I mean, I'm looking at their fixtures ahead. They've got Nantes, they've got Angers, Troyes, Caen, Saint-Etienne and Rennes up to the winter window. They're all completely winnable games, although obviously Connor in the round of 16, the Coupe de la Ligue as well. Do they need to sort of find what their formation is and really head into that second half of the season as the goal of being, at the moment at least, from the looks of things, fighting for that second position and that automatic Champions League spot?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, really. It's definitely finding out what they want to be. This season has felt very much like transition, and we've seen that with the rotation that Jardim has done all season long. And at the moment, they haven't found it. I think the way they set up against PSG was more of a contingency than something that they would look to progress going forward. I don't think Jardim is completely set on being as defensive as that, as much as Ligue 1 is famed for its excellent defensive displays. It's difficult because you've got a number of... You don't know who his first 11 really is yet. You've got a number of talented players in that squad. I think Keita Balde has begun to impress quite a lot. He seems to be adapting to Jardim's use of him as a forward, as well as in wide areas. I think that he's been one bonus, I think, of late. And I think with more games and a more settled setup, we could see even more from him going forward. I think Falcao, as you mentioned earlier, just needs to get back into the habit of scoring goals. But it would help if they had a setup and knew how they were playing. Last season, of course, we knew exactly how they were setting up most weeks. The 4-4-2, we knew who was going to play, and if one was missing, who would slip in. At the moment, it's completely up in the air almost. We've had Ronnie Lopez coming on the right. He's done well. I think he's done well, but he needs time again to really establish himself. He's not the same player as Bernardo Silva, so that means it's a completely different setup for how Monaco want to play. I'm still waiting to see more from Thomas Lemar. Obviously, it's a shame he's unavailable at the moment. I'm not sure how long he's out for. But once they get him back, and I want to see more from him, I think. I said that a few weeks ago. It doesn't seem like it's in his nature to grab games by the scruff of the neck. Although he did do well in that game against the Netherlands for France. So I think he's definitely got it in him. Really be a key player in helping to force Jardim to set up in a certain way and build players around him, for example. But at the moment, as you said, it's just not certain. I think in the next few months going forward, Jardim's going to be looking at areas he may need to improve on. And I think defence has become something that he does need to work on. I think in the preview show, I think it was Eric who made some good points about how we weren't really used to, the Monaco never really were tested defensively. They were always playing in the opposition half. And I think that's very, very true. And we're seeing Jemison come under a lot of fire. I think he's only in a bad run of form. And I think a few good games will bring him back. I don't think he's a washed-out player by any stretch of the imagination. But I think Raji as backup, I question it now, especially at the level they want to be at. I think he's good utility player in your average Ligue 1 game, but evidently he's not as reliable an option as they would probably like. You probably want a younger model in there someone to develop. I mean, when Glick went down, your heart was in your mouth, wasn't it? Because if he goes off, anything could have happened.
Yeah, I think I brought it up on the preview show as well, as they don't have anyone past those three. That was even more surprising, probably, is that after those three, they don't have. I don't think they have a recognisable centre back really who's played, or if there's one maybe in the youth team, I don't think they have anyone. That's probably where they're going to look in January, maybe at your Issa Diops, maybe, or a Yoris Nenyon, that kind of player. They're the kind of players they love to sign. That's maybe where they're going to eye in that January transfer window, or if they wait long enough, obviously the summer. But they desperately need cover there, and I think we can't really understate the missing of Bernardo Silva. He did sort of make the team tick at times, even if he didn't have the assist. He had the kind of hockey assist of passing the ball to the player who made the assist in the end. They're really missing that creativity, because out wide at the moment, Ronnie Lopez has had his moments, but we've mentioned that he prefers to get in behind where he can rather than create in front of them that Bernardo did. He's such a difficult player to replace, though, and such a individualistic talent. I mean, I know he's not necessarily starting for City at the moment, but they'll love him very, very soon when David Silva maybe slows down. It seems like it's never going to happen. But he's a perfect player like that, and Monaco really do miss him. Moving on to the team that went above them at the weekend, and that's Lyon, who smashed 5 past Nice at the Allianz Riviera at the weekend. Peter, they were in really excellent form. Fekir dropped out just before kickoff with an illness, and Cornet came in, and it made no difference really. They were still as vibrant, as attacking, even without Traore as well. They were just as good as they have been all season.
Yeah, you're being really kind starting on Lyon, because Nice are in for a grilling.
Yeah, we'll save that for a little bit of time. That's all right.
No, absolutely. The key question coming in was when Fekir dropped out with illness just before the game. You're questioning again. One of the things we've leveled at them is they're a little bit too reliant on Fekir. Is they're the man to get things out of a hole. He's the man they turn to. He's the man they sort of play through. But they showed that they've got bundles of options and talent. I was very impressed with Cornet, which is surprising considering how poor he was last time out, and how underwhelming he has been. And he was an option that's been relatively dismissed, I think, comparatively to the front four, which was obviously Bertrand Traore, Depay, Diaz, and Fekir. But he was excellent and helped a lot by Jallet being exposed, I will say kindly. And Lyon were ruthless. I didn't feel that they totally dominated the game, which sounds a bit silly considering the scoreline, but they picked them off at every opportunity. Every mistake was punished. Memphis Depay, of course, has come on leaps and bounds since he's joined Lyon in recent times. That decision by Genesio to drop him for the Dijon game clearly has sparked new life into him. He's added a lot of goals to his game. That's 10 now, I think, since that moment. And he's proving his worth. You've got Diaz still scoring. You've got Aouar coming into midfield and showing maturity beyond his years. One of the stats that was reeled out was that there's only 57 Ligue 1 appearances between the midfield three. And the midfield three is 2 teenagers and a 20-year-old, in Toussaint and Dembele and Aouar, which is extraordinary. And they made Nice's equivalent, if that's what they're worthy of being called, look totally abject, which they were. Another bright side for them is the clean sheet. I mean, they weren't really pushed, but obviously Jeremy Morel was absent. You do wonder whether, in the absence of one of them, the Diakabi can come in and do a good enough job. Seems very competent. They won't be tested next time out. I think they've got Lille next. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, Lille at home.
Well, that's 3 points. But no, I was really, really impressed with Lyon, and there's some fantastic stats about them since the victory over Monaco. I retweeted one, and it said they haven't conceded. They've conceded 1 goal since then, and that was against Everton. That's about I think it's 13 games or something. That's not many as that, but
so they currently got 7 clean sheets in a row in all competitions.
7, yeah.
It's just not bad at all, especially when you look at how many they've scored past teams. I mean, 5 past Troyes, 2 past Metz, 3 past Everton, 5 past Saint-Etienne. Obviously, the goalless draw at Montpellier, but 4 past Apollon Limassol in midweek, and then another 5 against Nice. It's free flowing. It's excellent to watch them really at times when they get under people's skin. And there was 2 terrific stats I saw at the weekend. The first one, which is the eye catching one for a lot of people, is that the trio for Lyon of Memphis Depay, Fekir, and Mariano Diaz have scored more goals than Neymar, Cavani, and Mbappe. Whether you'd said that at the start of the season, I don't think you would have, which is a really impressive stat for how they've pulled on, and especially Depay. I mean, I think me and you both, Peter, probably owe him an apology. I think he's definitely pulled it around.
Celebration is blocking out the haters, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Blocking us out. I don't think he listens to us.
Oh yeah, I think sometimes there's nothing better than eating your own words in football, and I think it's fantastic. He's actually doing a lot better because he is a talented footballer and he's showing exactly that what he can do. But my favourite stat really is Sam Ty of the Bleacher Report pointed this out as well when they finished the game with 6 players aged 21 or under on the pitch. That's Guiri from the Youth Academy, Maulida from the Youth Academy, Cornet, Youth Academy, and Dombele, 20, but he was brought in from Angers in the summer, Awa Academy, and Diakabe Academy. That's impressive, and it's showing again, not all teams have this kind of wealth, do they, Peter? You can't really say you should copy the Lyon model of bringing young players through like in this sort of caliber, because obviously Lyon have the resources and the pull and the all the facilities and excellent coaches to bring these players through. But is fantastic to see it, especially in this modern day and age of teams spending a load of money for a team that high up, playing that well, playing 5 academy graduates, isn't it?
Would you say that they're the Monaco of this season? I feel like they are quite comfortably have been the second best team in Ligue 1.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think I mentioned that as well at this time last year that Monaco were the best side to see in Europe. I think Lyon might be closing in on that. I mean, there is a few really good teams in Europe, in all honesty, for competition this season. You know, you look at Napoli, you look at Valencia have been excellent this season, and Guedes as well, which is a strange one to think for us French football fans. But Lyon, especially, and if you're watching if you spot them on TV, do give them a watch, because they do play that brand of exciting attacking football that we love to see. It reminds me a little bit of a Dortmund under Klopp. It has that free-flowing attacking football, players playing where they want to play, but they have an unbelievable defensive solidity to go with it now. I know it's sometimes because they're blowing away teams, but you would argue possibly that what you've seen this season from Monaco shows that maybe them last season scoring so many goals against other teams helped their defence so much more. They've been absolutely terrific to watch at times, and long may it continue if they're going to play that way. But
I think just before we move on, I do think we've got to give credit to Bruno Genesio, because I mean he has a lot of detractors, but I think the defensive solidity is a real case in point, because it was a real issue. They were conceding a lot of goals. I mean, but there's three free draws this season. And after the draw against Dijon, they've tucked themselves back in again, shut the door, and they haven't conceded in so long. And he's getting the best out of players like Depay, and he's allowing these players to express themselves. Because as you're saying, it is free-flowing. It is very, very natural, if that's the word to use, in the way they go forward. You feel like when they go forward, they're going to create opportunities and they're going to score. And I think that does come down to the coach and the way he is managing the players at his disposal and bringing through the young talent and trusting them.
I've just seen the acronym for Depay and Diaz and Fekir on Ligue 1's website, and I do not call them NDF. That just not the kind of nickname for any kind of footballing dynamic trio. I think let's leave that one to the side. Never call that one again. But I think it's time to talk about the team that they were awful really at the weekend, Nice, weren't they?
Yeah, it was really, really poor, and it's not something we're really used to with a Lucien Favre team that's usually so tactically drilled. Where do we start? Okay, well, I think as the game progressed and you're seeing the score tick over quite considerably, and defensively they were just awfully exposed. Your focus is on that back line, and we can just dismantle it, really. Dante was awful. Last season he was very, very good, part of a really strong unit defensively, providing that solidity and leadership, especially for Nice to go on and surprisingly challenge for the title. He looks a world away from that, and he looked a world away from that against Lyon. He's making mistakes, he's making poor decisions. The first goal, he's tried to flick the ball over a Lyon midfielder in the centre circle. He loses out, tries to fake a foul, which is just nowhere near a foul. Lyon go down the other end and score. Not helped by the fact that in this 5-3-2 that they also set up, similar to Monaco, you had it seemed like we had players who were not used to that at all. Jallet struggled at left back. He was exposed by Cornet. Jallet's had to play there because of, well, they haven't really replaced. His name's Dalbert, yes, on the left side. And Suke on the right was doing a George in terms of he was far too far forward. I wanted better expressing myself. And defensively, they seemed all over the place. I think the only one who I thought did okay was Le Marchand. I thought he was all right. I mean, I'm clutching at straws a little bit. I thought he was okay. Marlon, of course, got sent off. Couldn't really argue with the 2 yellows. He looked all over the place in terms of his shape and positioning. So that's a bad start to go with, and you can't really even look at Benitez. Cardinal, of course, has come under a lot of criticism, but defensively, you can't really criticise Benitez at all in goal. But after you've taken that aside and you just see the way they were left exposed by the midfield, it was embarrassing. I mean, I don't know what has happened to Jean Serry. He was abysmal. He kept giving the ball away. He was unable to affect the game, had no influence whatsoever. He was outrun. He was outplayed by Aouar and Toussaint and Ndombele. He was youngsters, not as experienced as he is. And he wasn't alone. I can't single him out on his own. I think Napoli's Mendy was, well, he was equally poor. I find it, based on that display, of course, before that, when he was the season before last, he was excellent. But it's almost laughable to see that Leicester saw him as a Kante replacement. He offered nothing. There was no physicality, no ball retention. I think the 2 of them gave the ball away so many times. They may as well have been playing for Lyon. I don't know what you think has happened to Seri, but he has not been the same player since the transfer window.
His head's turned, hasn't it? I think he was desperate to go to Barcelona, and at the same time, who can blame any player for that kind of thing? I mean, when you get an interest from a club like that, it does turn your head. And at the time, he'd earned it. Whether he'd be there now, you can't be so certain unless it was as possibly not a permanent replacement, at least, but as an option to change with a Iniesta, who is currently injured. That would have been the ideal time for him. Really, I think he's done in Nice. I think he's already sold out and has stopped there. But they were really awful. I mean, you've mentioned the midfield was bad. I don't get any of that combination, really. They tried to play Seri deeper and it doesn't work. They had Napoli's Mendy sort of play. Tameze, bless it, he's a young lad. He didn't really do much, to be fair. He couldn't really get himself into the game. Why you don't try someone a bit more experienced like Valter or Cosiello?
Quite weird at half time. I don't know if I just misheard him or translated what he said in the half time interview. I'm sure he said the coach wants us to do something and we don't really know. He said something along those lines, as if it was as if I don't really know what we're doing. And I of course I was like, that's really, really concerning.
Yeah, it looked like it. It looked like they were. If that was the instruction, they followed it to a T because they did absolutely nothing. I mean, and I do want to single out the defenders as well. I thought the defense was an embarrassment and how they're professional footballers, for one thing. It starts to worry them. I mean, you've mentioned the fullbacks. They were way too advanced, both of them. And for one thing, Jallet should know better, even if he is playing left back. He was exposed for both the first 2 goals that really made the headway. And then, like you mentioned, that I think the one that really stuck in the nerves really was that 4th goal. I mean, it sort of Seri loses it in the middle of the field. He's not really bothered about trying to win it back. Dante wiggles a leg at it. He's not really bothered about putting a proper challenge in. Marlon sort of thinks about doing something, but it teases a toe at it. He's not really bothered, and it goes in the bottom corner. And that's just exactly the attitude we're seeing from Nice at the moment at times. It's not me. It's not my responsibility. No one wants to take that mantle at the moment. Not Dante, not any of these players. All these experienced players. And it just screams of they've all sold out. And in all honesty, I feel sorry for Lucien Favre in a way. His tactics and bits have played a part in this, but I don't know if that mentioning of him going to Dortmund at the summer has maybe turned those players, not against him in a way, but they've sort of thought, well, maybe he's not going to be here long. There's still rumours now that with Peter Bosz struggling at at the German club that they might still head in for Favre, which is crazy to think of with where Nice are at the moment. But too many of these players are playing for themselves at the moment. They're not thinking about the team. They've really, really struggled. I mean, looking at the last month or so, they lost every game in October. They were awful. And the games they've won in November is a 1-0 win at home to Dijon, which they were a bit lucky, really, in all honesty, to win. And then the game against Zulte Waregem, which is, they're not doing so great in Belgium at the moment. But they have a lot of big fixtures coming up, especially in the next 2 weeks. They've got Toulouse away, who are playing awful. Metz, who are a Ligue 2 side. If they stay up, it's a miracle. Nice have to absolutely hammer both of them, really, to start doing something, because they do have a run of results heading to the into the winter break. Nantes, Bordeaux, and Lille that aren't going to be too taxing in any kind of way. They're not facing any of the big sides, but they need to start picking up points and doing something positive. I just feel like there'll be big change in the summer as well of this club. I think a lot of players will go. Seri, I think Balotelli's probably going to leave in the end. I think a player might look for somewhere else. I think some of the players they've brought in recently, like Wesley Sneijder and others, will think not really bothered. But it feels strange to feel that they obviously finished in the Champions League places, but it feels like, and I know I've bagged on him quite a bit this season, but it feels like Pierre-Lise Melou is their level now, which is a bit sad, really.
It is true, to be fair. And I think one of the issues has been that a number of sides in Ligue 1 over the summer had to undergo transformations, and it does seem like that Nice just haven't transformed well enough. They just haven't invested. I think Balotelli has actually been probably the best player. I've been quite impressed with him this season, and I'm surprised he's keeping his head in games, to be honest. I don't think he had a bad game necessarily against Lyon. You can tell that he was getting frustrated by smashing it from every angle and every ridiculous possibility he could. But that's the only thing Nice looked like they were capable of doing. So I wouldn't be surprised if he took off.
Yeah, I felt sorry for him in this one. He got 0 of the ball. I mean, he tried to do something. I mean, people complain that he sort of stands there and does nothing. He tried to do something in this game, but Nice weren't having any of it more than anyone else. But let's stop banging on them and let's head in and dip into our Ligue 1 grab bag, because there's a few teams I really want to talk about this week who have interesting storylines or have had really interesting weeks that we've not really touched upon so far this season. But we do start with a team that we've touched on quite a bit, and that's Lille, because the situation developing there is one of great interest. Obviously, with Marcelo Bielsa, he sat in a cafe and watched the game at the weekend where they lost 3-0. He's on what is believed indefinite leave, essentially, but he's supposedly bringing a case to the LFP, preempting wrongful termination, which suggests that the sacking of El Loco is pretty imminent, if not already happened, but just not fully released to the public. It's a bit of a shambles, really, in the end, isn't it, Peter? I mean, we talked about it on the preview show a little bit around the reports from Spain about him heading to Chile, and the French media saying they were unfounded and the like, and the problems with the backroom staff and the players not believing in his formation and playing players out of position. It's just a shambles, isn't it?
Yeah, he never goes quietly, does he? No, it's not pretty at all. And the latest development is slightly concerning, I think, for stability for the club. I think we want, from their perspective, we don't want their season to completely fall off a cliff if it hasn't already. I mean, it's on its way down, but there's still time to retrieve it. I don't know what the situation is with him now. It seems like he has now gone permanently. Well, you don't know. Who knows? My issue with the whole thing is timing a little bit. I mean, they showed him enough support to get to this stage, to a stage where they played against Marseille and played really well. I was impressed with them. I thought they were the better side. A little bit wasteful in front of goal. Perhaps that comes when you're under pressure at that end of the table. Then Marseille punished them and nicked 2 goals, which they didn't really deserve. Following week, they go and beat Metz, less deserved. And the week after that, after the international break, they beat Saint-Germain. And then obviously they lost to Amiens, and then it's all fallen apart again. I feel like if the question over Bielsa was, we need to move him on, this should have been done earlier. Of course, it doesn't take into consideration the fact that he's rumoured to want his 12.5 million euros. release clause, which is not a small amount of money by any stretch of the imagination, especially when apparently you're selling Nicola de Préville for money, which is just laughable. I really doubt that was the case. That must have been just a decision from Bielsa. But no, my issue is timing to an extent. But the problem now for Lille is, of course, their whole project was built around Bielsa. He was the marquee, the basis from which they wanted to develop this brand of football. Of course, Bielsa is so highly revered in, if you want to call it intellectual football terms, in terms of those who have been influenced by him. You're looking at Pochettino, you're looking at Guardiola, of course, Sampaoli, and a whole list of them take inspiration from Bielsa. But of course, Bielsa's ability as a coach is nowhere near as successful as any of those who have followed in his footsteps. And again, we've seen that. It seems like he's come in as a whirlwind of change and has just knocked everyone off their feet, and the club's just fallen apart. I feel sorry for the four who've come in. They've got a real challenge to pick up players who are generally quite young. There is probably limited, especially against the Montpellier game, we saw it. There was limited squad chemistry. They've got to pick them up, bring them together cohesively, and somehow stop them conceding goals, which just seems impossible.
Yeah, I think I talked enough about Marcelo Bielsa probably being a bit of a dinosaur in football last week to upset every single football hipster in earshot. But yeah, like you mentioned, the weird situation at the moment of having four assistant managers essentially at the moment in Diego Reyes, Pablo Quigora, Diego Flores, and João Sacramento as well. It's a strange situation that they're left with the pieces, but at the same time they're probably on edge because if they're all coaches that obviously Bielsa came in with, they'll probably go. There was questions as well about Gerard Lopez as well. Has he got really the finances he's suggesting? In some French sources, some sectors of the French media, they're worried about that, especially if they maybe get relegated. Is that maybe a worry for them? Does he have a way out of that? The deal is really, really murky there, and the hope is that they get something sorted because they were starting to get something on the pitch, but at the same time, you think if there's players discontent, that's the final drawing line. We've mentioned the fact that Thiago Maia played as a left back this season, and he's a useless left back. I mean, the only things he's done is be sent off and he's given away 2 penalties. That's not exactly what you want for the resume of your left back, really. And they've just looked awful. Like I said, they had those bright spots, didn't they? After that Marseille game, they had 2 wins. They looked okay. Maybe they're back on the horse, but then that loss to Amiens was pretty brutal, really, even though I sort of excuse it in a way because flipping from a Friday to a Monday, even though Amiens did it as well, it is difficult for any team to sort of rejig up, and they were really bad against Montpellier. I mean, Montpellier were really good, to be fair, and we'll come on to them a little bit later, but Lille just didn't have any verve about them anymore. They just don't have. They shifted too many of those experiences heads out for me. They went too much in the other direction. You know, when Monaco did a similar thing, they kept players like Moutinho and Carvalho for the longest time, and players like that. And Raji has been there for the longest time. Those kind of experienced players keep you on an even keel. Lille having none of those have maybe knocked them off kilter a bit. I mean, I get Mavuba's maybe not quite the player he was, but he would have been much better than some of the players in that central midfield. It just didn't make any sense, really. Basher as well, although he can be a bit rash, he was a decent centre-back, especially when you look at how Edgar Aye's played this season, at least anyway. But
I think the saving grace for them is probably that they have got, as much as they have cast aside these experienced players and got rid of some. I mean, we'll talk about Dijon in a minute, and Sheker's playing really, really well, and you just think, well, why is he not playing for them? And then obviously we mentioned de Préville before, and you think, what's going on there? So there have been some questionable decisions, but at the same time, the reprieve, if you want to offer one to Lille supporters, is that there is a basis of talent there. These players that they have brought in do show glimpses of ability. I mean, Edgar Aye has been poor, but at times he has shown himself to be for in the under-21s tournament, he was excellent over the summer, and I think he's a player with talent. I think Luis Araujo is a player with talent. Maia, when he plays in the right position, has got talent. Thiago Mendes as well. So there is a squad there of ability. It's a question of whether someone can come in and save the sinking ship, but it does seem desperate times. But they're not cut adrift either. That's the other thing. It's all bunched up quite nicely. So if they can sort out this Bielsa mess, which just because it's Bielsa, you just don't know what's going to happen now. I mean, it could drag on for weeks, and if they have to pay out, that could then affect them adversely, and then you'll get the comments saying we have to sell players, and then suddenly you really are staring relegation down the barrel. But there is some hope if Gerard Lopez can sort it out, but it doesn't look promising at the moment, that's for sure.
No, it's a worry. But on to a team that have turned things around recently, and is the team you mentioned then in Dijon with 4 wins in their last 5, and they've really come on strong. I mean, some people would argue their wins against Troyes and Toulouse, who are struggling, and Metz, but their games they need to be winning. They were a little bit unlucky in that middle game as well against Nice, where they lost 1-0. They did reasonably well against a Nantes side that were running, well, were on about a 7 or 8 game streak of not winning and not losing as well themselves. And we mentioned it briefly on the preview show as well, obviously going through their game before the weekend, but they went on and performed excellently in that game. They have a really interesting team that are starting to play football, and for their side down near the bottom, you don't really expect this as much, but they play attacking style and they want to score goals and they want to entertain. It's a really good thing to see, isn't it?
Yeah, they do stand out, especially in a division that is famed more for its defensive solidity than it is for its attacking football. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way by any stretch of the imagination, but when you look at the sides who are down there, it is more a case of keeping them out than scoring goals. And Dijon are an attractive side to watch. They're scoring a lot of goals. I think you have to go as high as Marseille. I think that's right to see who scored more than them this season, which is no mean feat. Marseille are 4th in chasing that Champions League spot, and they've got some. They play in a really proactive way, in a way that I don't think many of us expected either. Especially considering their summer business, there was sort of that emphasis on defence, and last season, of course, they did play in an attractive way. You began to worry after Lois Gioni and Lise Mello both departed. But it feels like they've got a really nice unit going forward. As I said before about Shecker, I think he's done really well. He scored again. And what I like to see, when I see Dijon, I haven't seen them as much as I probably should have. But what I do like to see with them is the runners they have from midfield. It's not a question of we're looking to snatch a goal or they are, whenever they go forward in numbers. You've got Kwon and Shecker, both of them going beyond Tavares into the penalty area, giving them options. I think Wesley Saïd has looked very, very good. Maybe he's finally found somewhere to call a home. Samaritano's done okay as well. He's pushed on, and they do have that solidity behind them. Obviously, Baptiste René in goal, and Djilabodji's come in and done all right. I mean, he gave away a penalty, but against Toulouse. But when that's the thing that stands them out, and I think Olivier Delalio has done a really, really good job with Dijon to not only make them an attractive side, but to score goals and win games. And that was the problem from the start of the season. But now that they've pushed up into 12th, they're scoring goals, playing attractive football, and it's not a bad time to be a Dijon supporter when you're going down and seeing your team outplay a number of sides and are willing to look for goals. Kwon especially has been excellent.
Yeah, I think a couple of things really. Olivier Delalio is probably underrated in the job he's done at Dijon. I mean, he got them up. He kept them up as well by playing an attacking brand. It did help have players like Diony scoring the goals as well, but Tavares did chip in. But it's the unit that they have. Like you say, the unity between the players, like Sleety and Xhaka, who came from Lille, they've both been really good. And we thought at the time that they seemed like surprising deals. They've made a difference. Then you meant like Tavares is still scoring goals. Saïd is contributing. But the player you mentioned at the very end, I really like Chang Hun Kwon. I think he's an excellent little player. He seems to he's got a great energy to him. He's getting into the box when they need him as well, and adding to attacks. He's scoring goals. He's creating goals. He's a little bit of a live wire at the moment. I mean, he scored 4 goals and 2 assists so far this season, and in 12 games, 11 starts, which is great stats to see. But especially in his last couple of games, I mean, he scored against Troyes, scored against Toulouse. He's been creating in those games as well. He had an assist against the Troyes game. The one before for Sleety's goal, he assisted against Metz as well. He's really in a nice vein of form, and those kind of players is exactly what Dijon want. People who work hard, people who put the effort in and also contribute to both phases of the game where they can. That's exactly the kind of player you need when you're playing at the bottom of the table, and he seems like an ideal signing for that kind of club, and they're on the rise again. I mean, I mentioned on Thursday as well that they have a really nice run of games coming up, really, heading into the winter break. I mean, they've got Amiens on the midweek fixtures, which is an interesting one because they're playing nice football at the moment as well. That might be a quite entertaining game. They've got Bordeaux, who are struggling, Guingamp, who are struggling, Lille, who are struggling, and Angers, who are struggling. You could argue there could be possibly even 15 points. If you've got 15 points there, you could argue that they could quite easily get 12 from that if they play the way they're playing at the moment. And that would be a massive lift for them heading into the winter break. They could possibly be very comfortably outside the relegation zone. And it would not be any kind of surprise at the moment. But a team I did mention in that run who are struggling at the moment, I mean, we've always praised them so far this season, Angers, really, but the draws are starting to catch up with them in the last couple of weeks. Looking back, sort of October was where we thought they started turning it around when they beat Caen. They finally sort of broke their draw ducks, but then they went to lose to Toulouse. They then drew with Strasbourg. That 5-0 defeat at Paris Saint-Germain seemed to knock them again because they drew it on Guingamp. They lost at Troyes, which pushed them very close to the drop zone. Other results have really kept them away, with obviously like the likes of Nice losing, but what's going wrong, really, Peter? Is this side just not quite finding the right mix of the players they've got? Are they maybe losing some of that defensive solidity with the players they've brought in? Are they sort of finding their way into the season? Because it's only going to get harder from here on in.
Yeah, I think it will only get harder from here on in. You're right about the draws. They just seem to have stacked them up. And I think the reason we were praising them is because they would go for such an extended period unbeaten. The problem is they've only won twice this season, which is only one more than Metz, and that's the second worst in division, and that they're slowly sliding down the table. I think what's gone wrong is they're unable to see out games is part of the issue. I mean, going forward, they have got plenty of options. I think Toko Ekambi has been excellent. We talked about him at the start of the season as being one to watch because he was good last year, and I think he's pushed on again. And you can see why clubs were showing interest in him. I think it was Brighton. I think we were interested in him.
Yes, yeah, it was.
Summer. And that deal fell through. But I wouldn't be surprised if they came back for him because he has been a standout player for them. But again, it's that the thing with draws are that they can often be a red herring in that you draw a number of games in a row, and you're thinking, okay, we've got a number of games unbeaten. Then you lose one, and suddenly it flips on its head, and you're something in my throat there. Suddenly you're in a bad run of form. When I've seen them, they want to play football. They like to play going forward. I remember against PSG, they took the game to them and got punished. When they played Lille, they were all over them, created chance after chance. They scored, they took the lead, and then they threw it away. They allowed them back into the game. Of course, it was a fantastic strike from Depravil, but they didn't see the game out. At no stage in that game against Lille did they look like they were going to drop points. And their home form has been wretched. I don't think they've won at home in the league this season. And Troyes was actually their first defeat on the road. So they've got this really weird balance. And getting their form right at home is key to any side wanting to stay up. So changing things at the Stade Raymond Kopa would certainly help matters. But I think it's that sense of just being unable to see out games. I think they came back to draw with Lyon after that controversial red card. So they have got that in them to fight to win games, or at least to pull themselves back into it. And that's why we probably praise them so much, is that when they do go forward, when they do create opportunities, they do well, and they do have that attacking arsenal. I don't think Crivelli is a bad player at all. I think he does have goals in him, but they need more from him. And I think defensively, they've got to see out games, and that's all about match control. And if you don't have that, it can punish you. And once you start to slip, once you start losing, confidence can go. I mean, the next 3 games, they've got Rennes, Then they travel to Monaco and then Montpellier. I don't think they're winnable games necessarily. Rennes seem to finally be. I think they'll take a huge boost from the win against Nantes. They don't win at home, Angers, so that's why it goes against them. They want to take points from that. Then Monaco, obviously in a rough patch of form, but they're a very good side. And Montpellier don't concede goals. So they are 3 tough games, and they do need to start winning as much as they've drawn. I mean, they've only lost 4 times. You have to go right up the table to Montpellier, actually, before you see a side that has lost as few. But they've got to turn these draws into wins, and they've got to learn. It's match control. That's what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's when these, like I say, these draws start catching up on you. It can start becoming a real pain. I mean, I just feel as well that Stéphane Moulin's not really worked out what his best side is to create wins. I mean, at the weekend, he brought Fulgini on, who I think's had a half-decent start to the season. It was nice to see Keo Fonfon back on the field after 15 months out. I read that the other day. I still can't believe that it's been that long since we've seen him, but great to see him back on the field. And yes, of course, it's the best name in French football. But it's fantastic to see him back on the field. And yeah, you sort of, like I say, they had Ismail Traore on the bench. They tried to bring on Guillaume as well, who I've never really been sold by. He doesn't really add an enormous amount that Crivelli couldn't have done himself. They're just stuck in a rut. And like you say, that next run of games, I mean, they've got Rennes and Monaco next, which isn't ideal. And Montpellier as well, who is the team we'll talk about next. But it's really tough sort of moment for them. But the side that is certainly not having a tough moment really is Montpellier, who we've mentioned a few times this season for the fantastic, oddly enough to say, draws with Paris Saint-Germain and Monaco and Lyon, holding them to a goal each. And they have the best defensive record now in Ligue 1, which is mightily impressive. I mean, 8 goals all season, although people would argue that 12 goals the other end does maybe dilute that a little, but they're on a nice run of the last sort of month or so, going back really just before that Paris Saint-Germain game against Troyes in week 6. They won. They've claimed 2 draws against the top 2 after that. They beat Nice. They beat Saint-Etienne. There's a loss against Rennes in there, but they draw with Amiens, they draw with Lyon, and then they put 3 past a hapless Lille at the weekend. And played some really nice football in this one for seemed like the first time in a long while, but they just look like they're starting to build on that solidity now with the likes of Roussillon and I know Paul Lan and Sleety as well is a good player that they've really leaned on as well. They're starting to finally really be an interesting unit. And with Ninga coming back as well, scoring at the weekend, Giovanni Sio scoring and creating a goal as well. He finds a home. Cessignon is playing good football again as well. They're a really interesting side again.
Yeah, no, they are. It is astounding that they're only 3 points off 5th and they've got Giovanni Sio up front. It's even more astounding than they're getting goals from him. But no, you're absolutely right. It's the points they've taken off the big teams is the most striking statistic. As you mentioned them, it was PSG, Nice, Saint-Etienne, Monaco, Lyon. All of them have dropped points against Montpellier. And that shouldn't be sniffed at. And I know you're a huge fan of defending, Nathan, so they must be up there with one of your favourite teams at the moment. But it is really, really impressive to only concede 8 times this season for a side that I don't think... I mean, Zakarian is known for his defensive setups, but he seems to have got it very, very right here. And you're looking at a defence that is led by Helton, isn't it?
Vitorino Helton.
Yeah. I mean, he is beyond over the hill, but he's leading by example. And the standout player at the moment is Roussillon at fullback. He was excellent against Leo again. He got a goal, which is unusual for him, but rampaging down that right-hand side, causing all sorts of problems. I mean, Lille were a shambles defensively, but that said, going forward, they look to fret, and that's very positive going forward. If you're going to add goals to the absolute multitude of clear sheets that they've collected and stuck on the shelf. And you wonder how far they can go this season.
Yeah, I think Roussillon's been one of the best players of the season so far. He's been excellent, really, in all the performances going forward and back. It's great to have Ninga back. He's a great goal scorer when he's on form. He's maybe not quite got up to pace, but maybe this one gets him the momentum that he needs really after that setback last season. That when he was again starting to hit form, he got picked up the injury. But I do want to take a moment for Vitorino Hilton. The 40-year-old is a Rolls Royce of a centre back, isn't he? He's not really got much pace left, but he tries to do his positioning is second to none, really, because the fact he never gets caught out for anything, he never gets out of position, he never seems to be beaten easily because he's got great strength and great belief in his ability with the ball at his feet as well. He's an excellent player, and I think that keeping him as a heartbeat. I know they really can't rely on him for much longer, but I don't know how old he could get to at the moment. Really, he's absolutely doing a sterling job at a club that are heading on the upwards curve. At least a little bit of time left, really, for our League on snapshot. So we'll keep it brief this week. Peter, what's your snapshot?
My snapshot is the Breton derby, Claudio Ranieri's first taste of Derby de la Bretagne, and it ended in defeat against a Rennes side that will take a huge amount of confidence. Obviously, new coach Sabri Lamouchi's come in, inheriting a side that invested in the summer. It seems like they want to try and move in the direction of the Lyon sides. I know we mentioned that last week about what Lyon sides should do, and Rennes do have the capability to do that with their excellent academy. And they got a huge result against Nantes, 88th minute winner from Wabi Kazri, the former Sunderland man. He looks to have found himself again. Since he's come in, he's scored goals. He's been a really good option. And what I like in particular about Rennes is that they seem to be forming a nice combination going forward. Obviously, Bourigeaud has been superb. They've got Yoann Gourcuff back, doing very well. And you've got Kazri. And as a free, they connect very, very well. And I think once you get Ismail Assar back from injury, obviously he's a longer-term layoff, you might have a decent attacking outfit there that can be more of a threat and more of a side that they want to be in the top half of the table. But ended in defeat for Ranieri. A red card for Palois as well didn't help matters. But yeah, a good win for Rennes. Yeah,
he always feels liable for that, doesn't he, Palois? It's a bit of a misnomer for him. He does seem to get a little bit rash in some of these games. I think it's a little bit firing. I think that's his second red card against Rennes as well. I'm pretty sure he had that long suspension after getting red carded at Rennes while he was still at Bordeaux. So it doesn't really particularly like being at the Rojan Park, does he? My snapshot this week is a little bit of a weird one, shall we say? And it was at the Stade Geoffroy Guichard between Saint-Etienne and Strasbourg. A relatively entertaining 2-2 draw, really, that showed the fighting spirit of the away side and maybe the malaise that Les Verts are still in. But the bit that I liked in this game was actually on the sidelines, and Julien Sablé bringing back the old jumper combo that you don't see in managers nowadays. We saw a lot of it in the 90s, maybe, where the manager would wear a jumper with, like, he had Le Coq Sportif, which is the sponsor for Saint-Etienne. It was a big and broad one in a big green jumper. We have so many managers in suits or just in a big long coat now. It was great to see on a chilly evening, just a jumper to warm the French manager, although it didn't really turn into results yet, although they've brought in some help in Gasset being in the backroom staff. Maybe that might do something in the near future. But that's all we have time for this week. My thanks to Peter and for all of you listening at home. Join us for the preview show on Thursday. We will also cover an exciting midweek version of Liga, and the main show will be back at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt and goodbye.